Hello, everyone. Jim Coventry from Rotowire here with today's week 7 must-start fantasy football players. Okay, some of these players are auto-starting, but there's a great case to use them at DFS. Other players are borderline starters, so we're going to give a lot of good fantasy intel. I think the best thing about this show, though, is I'll tell you what I've learned over the last number of weeks, and it'll help you frame some decisions and ideas about players maybe a little more detailed than you might have before, maybe not. All right, number 5. Only one quarterback this week, so we'll go with Jimmy Garoppolo. Jimmy G has at least 253 yards and 2 touchdowns in 2 straight games. And here's the deal. The 49ers defense is really, really banged up now, and I don't know that things are getting better anytime soon. So this was an elite defense that was going to be running the ball a ton. They may be trailing a lot more than expected. Well, Jimmy Garoppolo has amazing weapons. You got Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk. Put them in any order. They each do something phenomenally well. It is one of the better trios of weapons in the entire NFL. It's just that their usage has made them not what they could be, like George Kittle. If he was featured like Travis Kelce, he'd blow Travis Kelce away. He's way better than Kelce. No offense to Kelce, but it's not even close. And, we look at things like that. And Brandon Ayuk is a superstar in his own right. But again, just the lack of downfield consistent passing, just can't utilize him well. So Jimmy G may be a player that if you have to stream him or grab him off the waiver wire, you definitely could consider if you have a bye week or something to give Jimmy G a whirl. All right, number 4, the tight ends. Evan Engram, at least 5 catches in each of his last 2 games. It's tight end. If you're getting those catches, and he's getting targets as well. He has a few games with at least 7 or 8 targets, and he's beginning to be more of a part of the offensive scheme there. Here's what's going on. So when we look at Evan Engram in the entirety of the Jaguars offense, we saw Christian Kirk get off to a red-hot start, and then he has fallen pretty much flat since. Here's what happened. Defenses realized that the Jaguars don't have receivers who are explosive. As a result, defenses begin to compress in. We talk all the time about too high shells. Well, you don't really have to go with that approach against the Jaguars. The too high shell is designed to limit explosives. Well, they're not getting a lot of explosives. And I get it, Travis Etienne's an explosive player, but he's a running back. We're talking about receivers. And so the offense has to function underneath. And Evan Engram, with his size and speed, and he's really a super sized wide receiver, he may be one of their best options over the middle and the compressed area of the field. So he is going to keep seeing targets. Defenses are not likely to change their approach on the Jaguars. And don't really bash Trevor Lawrence. I know this segment isn't about him, but Trevor Lawrence, that's very limiting to him to have defense just compress the whole field without playmakers. You've got to give him something, and they don't have that element. They really need to get some speed in that offense. All right, Zach Ertz, look, I was worried that when DeAndre Hopkins was coming back, things would start to fizzle out for Ertz. Ertz has 26 targets in his last 3 games. He has a number of 10 target games. He's catching at least 6 balls a game. Marquise Brown got hurt. He's out at least 6 weeks. So, look, I know Ertz isn't a receiver, but he's part of the receiving game. And those targets, they throw a lot because their defense is terrible and they're going to trail a lot. They're going to throw. And Zach Ertz is going to continue to see targets. I think he would have lost targets had Marquise Brown stayed healthy. If you put Hopkins and Brown on the field, that's going to be a squeeze on Ertz because the preference is going to be throwing to those wide receivers. Ertz at this stage of his career is more of a catch and fall guy, but he's going to continue that, and he's going to be a great PPR option. But I would have been advocating trading him before last week, assuming both receivers there. And then Hunter Henry's next. So we have to frame this, though. He has at least 54 yards in each of his last 2 games. He was great last year. Great is a relative term, but for what he was an excellent fantasy option last year who you were drafting literally outside of top 12 tight ends. And this year, people had more promise, thinking there'd be some rapport built up with Mac Jones. Didn't happen. Now, those 2 good games for Hunter Henry have come with Bailey Zappi at quarterback. So the question is, when Mac Jones comes back, is he going to go to Henry, or is Jones going to do what he had been doing, targeting receivers more? And we don't know that. I would say right now, if Zappe gets another start, which Jones has been practicing limited, so he may be close. I think Henry right now with Zappe, you're starting him. But with Mac Jones under center, if he gets there, I think you have to be careful. If the first game with Mac Jones back sees Henry involved, then we might be able to say, you know what, maybe the offense kind of morphed a bit and he's become more part of it. All right, number 3, the wide receivers are next. DeAndre Hopkins is back. And again, right as Hollywood Brown's out with an injury. Now, I want you to understand what DeAndre Hopkins was last year. And it's a pretty good narrative here. So he only averaged 4.2 receptions, 57 yards. What bailed him out is he was averaging 0.8 TDs a game. He had 8 touchdowns in 10 games. Now, the problem with the touchdowns is that Cardinals offense is nowhere in the stratosphere of what they were last year. So those touchdown opportunities, those might take a complete nosedive. They're just not in the red zone that much. Now, last year, Hopkins didn't even have a single 90-yard game. And his injuries, which a lot of people reference his injury started up in week 8. Before the injury, he had either 3 or 4 catches in 4 out of 7 games. So it was a low volume situation. And he was held to 55 or fewer yards in 4 of 7 games. So the majority of games, he wasn't laying it up. And he only had one 10-target game. And that was when he came back. He was between injuries. It was in week 14. And when he had the 10 targets, he went 5 for 54 on 13 targets. So it was a really inefficient game. I was believing last year that DeAndre Hopkins was beginning his decline phase. And I think because of the suspension this year, I think a lot of people would just kind of forget where he was at, excuse some things off. They're citing an injury that was part of the reason, but it wasn't the whole reason. He was already declining. Look, you're starting him as a wide receiver 3. You're hoping you get enough volume for a wide receiver 2, but this is not, in my opinion, the version of DeAndre Hopkins that we've seen in prior years. Gabe Davis, next one. He's seen at least 6 targets in 2 straight games, and in those 2 games, 245 yards and 3 touchdowns. So the target volume isn't great, and it may not be great. There could be games. And right now, defenses they can't just go in solely saying, we got to stop Stephon Diggs. And they have to go in saying, we got a deep threat to worry about, and we have to worry about Diggs. Diggs is the priority. But when you have a guy that could beat you over the top, defenses are very nervous about explosive plays. And sometimes the explosives are what the point, the priority is to stop. But Davis isn't seeing enough targets to scare defenses yet. On that moderate target volume, he does have some weekly downside, but his size and his ability to get downfield, it's a great match with Josh Allen. When Josh Allen sees a favorable matchup, he is also throwing the ball in tight windows, and he is excelling. So this is a great situation for Gabe Davis. As long as he's healthy, and he had 2 bad games, his ankle was hurt. You play him every week, and if you have a down game or 2, so be it. But don't sit him when you see him he ends up with 150 yards and his touchdown. It's going to be on you. Allen Lazard. The problem with the Packers offense is they're horizontal. They really don't have players at receiver creating separation. Aaron Rodgers just looks like he's checked out. You remember at the end of the days when Mike McCarthy was the coach and he didn't want to be there? He's starting to look like that right now. Aaron Rodgers doesn't look happy. And when Aaron Rodgers isn't happy, maybe things don't work so great, right? One of the best quarterbacks we'll ever see, but man, you need him happy. Well, Lazard, regardless, though, he's now getting 8 or 9 targets a game in his last 3 games. And with Rodgers having to throw him the ball, that rapport is there. So Lazard was often used as a blocker, but they're having him do that less now because they really need him. Romeo Doubs is getting a lot of targets, but they're not materializing into much of anything. And what's really producing consistently is Lazard. So Lazard has been playing. He's either getting yardage or touchdowns. And so Lazard right now, I think you put him in that wide receiver 2 bucket because he has produced, it's almost like 4 straight weeks. And so I think we're going to ride that. Alec Pierce, at least 49 yards at 4 straight games. He came through late in the last game. It was a long touchdown. He basically was kind of shut down. He had a late 30-yard touchdown that made his fantasy, but he's getting it done one way or the other. Not super high upside, but he's definitely giving you those wide receiver 3 numbers, and that's definitely very strong for him. We might see some wide receiver 2 games, but I think right now you're counting on him as a 3. Indy's going to have to throw a lot. Their defense is going to give up points. And they haven't been running the ball well. Now, I'll talk at one point later this week. Their offensive line looks a little bit better. And I do see questions. It's just so relative to what I was talking about. I'm going to answer DB Cooper's question right now. So why isn't Rodgers throwing more checkdowns? He should be throwing not just those, but Aaron Jones should be lined up as a receiver. He has done that over the years, and he is nearly impossible for defense to stop. He is an elite playmaker. The coaching staff, for whatever reason, is not using him all. So, yes, sure, check downs to Aaron Jones, but Aaron Jones can run routes, wheel routes out of the backfield, line up. He can run the slot. He can run the outside. He is their best player aside from Aaron Rodgers on offense. And until they embrace that, you can't just run him up the middle occasionally on these, the little sweeps outside. You got to get him in explosive situations. And I wish I could answer why, but it's very irresponsible in their use of him. And again, as a fantasy player, we make these assumptions based on coaching, understanding how to use their players. And I have some investment in Aaron Jones, and I tell you what, their coaching staff has made that a poor choice. I don't regret the choice, but I thought the coaching staff would realize they needed to lean on Jones, and they haven't. All right. I'm going to talk about Darnell Mooney. He has 94, 52, and 68 yards in his last 3 games. If a fantasy manager can't live with 94, 52, and 68 yards in 3 straight games, you're misunderstanding. You may have drafted him as a wide receiver too. Those yardage numbers are good. Nothing wrong with him. His targets, 5, 5, and 12. Here's the thing with Mooney. The first couple games, we had the monsoon. Green Bay, the Bears didn't throw. But then the opposing defenses realized, oh, wait a minute. The Bears don't want to let Fields throw the ball. So we're going to make Fields throw the ball. So what they're doing is teams now are stopping the run against Bears. They're loading the box. And they're saying, all right, Justin Fields, go ahead and beat us. Mooney gets 12 targets last week. Mooney's getting downfield shots that weren't there before. Darnell Mooney, he's going to have a couple bad weeks. It's going to happen. Hey, I keep saying this. Great receivers have had bad weeks this year. Jamar Chase has had bad weeks this year. Justin Jefferson's had bad weeks. So Mooney's going to have bad weeks. But 3 straight weeks of at least 52 yards, sign me up for it. And if he's already on your roster, again, start him as a wide receiver 3. Frame your thought of him. Don't frame him the same way you did before. All right, running backs next. David Montgomery averaging 75% of the snaps over his last 3 active games. We thought Khalil Herbert would be a much bigger part of the offense this year. The Bears didn't pick up the 5th-year option on Montgomery. Obviously, Montgomery has the same role he had last year. When he's healthy, he's on the field almost 80% of the time. You're starting with confidence each week. Even though defense are trying to take the run away, he's going to get volume. And when you're at running back, you need volume, and he'll be used in the passing game. So he may not have the upside games as teams focus on the run. He had that great game against Green Bay, but that was before defenses really tried to take that away. Montgomery, though, is going to produce for fantasy enough to get you by as an RB2. Ken Walker, at least 88 yards and a touchdown in 2 games, 23 touches against the Cardinals. Now, there aren't going to be many games where Seattle's playing with a lead and controlling it late because their defense is so bad. Arizona's just a really bad team right now. But that said, Walker can be used in the pass game. Very good runner. I think Seattle keeps games close enough where he's relevant every week. So I think Walker's floor could be 16 touches, and we see the ceiling is well into the 20s. So I think Ken Walker, you're starting him as a borderline top 12 option. Josh Jacobs is next. They had the bye last week. He had at least 26 touches, 174, and at least 1 touchdown in each of his last 2 games. He played over 80% of the snaps. Everything was off the charts. But here's the problem. Raiders go into a bye, right? And during the bye, they're 1-4. Their season's over. Josh Jacobs, they didn't pick up his 5th-year option. They are heavily invested in their passing game. They're paying Derek Carr. They brought in Devontae Adams, Darren Waller. Josh McDaniels, I assume he wants a job. If they're going to run Josh Jacobs all day and lose, that's going to get him fired pretty quick. I don't know organizationally if they have these discussions. Josh Jacobs, if they use him, he's going to get it done. I don't know that Josh McDaniels gets it. So I would say he probably keeps going. You start him until he doesn't. But Josh Jacobs right now, RB1, right? But if McDaniels gets the message, the economics of the NFL and the future of the franchise, he's throwing the ball. They're a pass-first team. And Josh Jacobs gets far less production. Again, I don't know if McDaniels will get it, and that's fine. Fantasy managers love it. Just keep playing Jacobs, right? Zeke Elliott hasn't had fewer than 14 touches in his last 5 games, frequently gets 18 to 20. He's only been under 75 yards once in the last 5 games. So he's been money in the bank as an RB2, definitely giving you that high floor, which you love. Occasionally gets in the end zone, occasionally catches a pass or two. So, Zeke Elliott's been a real solid fantasy play this year. And then Devin Singletary, 15, 7, and 21 touches are all over the board in the last 3 games. But his yardage, 96, 56, and $1.07. He's being involved in all types of game scripts, and it's been great for Singletary. And right now, Zach Moss is a healthy scratch. James Cook, I don't think is quite yet ready for prime time. And so Singletary is going to dominate snaps. He is a very, very high-end option each week with a great floor. Now, Miles Sanders, let's exclude the 29-touch game and the downpour against the Jaguars because it was a weather-related anomaly. But take that out. He's still getting 16 to 20 touches a game. And his yardage, though, is between 46 and 86 in those 4 games, other than the downpour game where he went off. He scored in 2 of 5 games. So he doesn't frequently have a super high ceiling. But again, he's one of those amazing floor plays. He does have ceiling too, but he's an amazing floor play. And we love those. You have to have those in your fantasy lineup. So you start him as a running back too. Brian Robinson will be interesting. His second game back, 17 carries for 60 yards. So, well less than 4 yards a carry and a touchdown. The Bears are better against the run than they are the pass. Bears aren't good against either. But, Robinson's still getting acclimated. So my guess is he continues to see work. Now the coach, Ron Rivera, did say something along the lines that he was worried about not getting Gibson involved. He realized in the second half he needed to get him more involved. Well, if he's true to that, then that means this really would be a 3-man backfield with J.D. McKissick, and that could hurt Robinson. But right now, you'd have to bank on Robinson getting 12 to 14 carries at least, and maybe more. So again, I think that you have some concerns as to what his workload's going to be, but I think at least a flex, you're starting to at least a flex right now, and you're hoping for a little bit more. And then let's quick hit the superstars real quick. Do a couple of them, and then we'll take questions, and we'll move on out. Joe Burrow's been really inconsistent. Here's my observation. When they play a team at a top pressure rate, he's been poor. When he plays a team that has a low pressure rate, he's been very good. So I think when I break down games and you watch my shows, we'll talk about the defense he's playing. We really called it last week against New Orleans, said that he would go off. We said that Chase would go off, and it was because New Orleans is a very low pressure rate, and it also helped Marshawn Lattimore was out. Let's see. Alvin Kamara, at least 124 yards in each of 2 straight games, been targeted 15 times. Now, that might be an Andy Dalton thing, so we got to be careful. If Andy Dalton goes back to the bench and Winston takes over, we don't know who's going to start. There was buzz that he might be involved. But if Dalton's the quarterback, Kamara is going to get targets. If Winston's the quarterback, we have very big concerns about that. If we find out that Winston's going to be the full-time quarterback going forward, if you could get a steal of a deal for Kamara, it may be worth selling because the drop-off in the receiving game is going to be massive because Winston just not your screen game quarterback. Let's see who else we take here. Let's see. I think we're good on it. So first of all, before I get to questions, if you're watching on YouTube, please hit this like and subscribe button. I'd really appreciate it a lot. And if you like the content over at Rotowire, get 2 days free behind the paywall. Let's go to rotowire.com/right. No credit card needed, no shenanigans. Just get you on the site for a couple days, read our great content, and hopefully you enjoy what you see. A couple questions here. What wide receiver can you get for Stevenson? These questions are always difficult, Sanga XD, because it depends how many teams are in your league. It depends which roster configurations individual teams have. Here's what I tell everybody to do. You look at the rosters in your league. You find out who needs a running back. Then once you find out who needs a running back, you check the depth on your team, and you see if they have a part at maybe receiver or somewhere else that make your team better. Then you propose, see, a 10-team league is kind of like all-star teams. So, that's another question. So anyway, but you go to the other rosters and you construct a deal that makes your team better and makes the other person's teams better. that gives you goodwill trading in your league, and it also makes your team better. But again, when you want to deal in the future, if people think you're fleecing them, they'll stop dealing with you. DB, good question. We answered it earlier. I'm glad you asked. It was timely when you asked that. Fran, DeAndre, yeah, it's a tough call, D. Johnson or Jacoby Myers. I think ultimately Jacoby Myers is kind of the guy. I know they have other guys, but he's the one that's going to see like the regular targets week to week. Where I think when Kenny Pickett's in, Deontay Johnson will have his big target games, but I think there'll be games where it's going to be the matchups get better for George Pickens. He had a couple tough matchups. Pickens is going to have target games. Freiermuth was out. He's going to get targets. I think Myers has less target competition. So that's the route I would go because of that. Deontay Johnson's a much better player. But I think in terms of consistent targets, I think Myers over the course of the season ends up being that guy. CB, all right, this is a week 7 question, and I'm still on my last day of turn back mode. This is turn back day. Still, it's Wednesday. I turned the page to the following week. I still have a lot, people getting to people through waivers today and all that. So if you want to get me that question, you can always send me at Jim Coventry NFL on Twitter. You can always send me a question there, and I'll be happy to answer it. If you come on the stream tomorrow, I'll be ready to turn forward. But I will answer it for you. But again, just not to that point of the week yet. All right. Chris, PPR League, your Debo, Waddle, and Higgins, thinking of shipping Waddle for Kenny Walker and DJ Moore. DJ Moore is going to be useless because, 43 yards is kind of like his ceiling. And I don't know if they want Baker around, but I guess he'll get back in. They're talking about bringing Darnold in at some point. But Ken Walker is fine because you need a running back. If you need a running back, you make the deal. That's kind of what we're looking at. So I think the running back for the receiver, you paid a premium to get the running back. So I think that works. And CB, you're welcome, man. But yeah, definitely hit me up. I'm happy to answer your question anytime. And then Chris, was there a follow-up on that? Let me see. I just see your running backs are Kamara and Rodgers. That's a good duo to have. All right. Thanks, everyone. Oh, I got one more question, and I'll get out of here. DB, what's going on in Denver? Go, well, yeah, I know. So you've offered Aaron Jones for Kyler, and Murray's not playing well. And he gets the DeAndre back, but he loses Marquise Brown, and that's huge. Murray's starting to run, so that helps. And so you get the rushing production, that's good. But that offense is dysfunctional right now. Cliff Kingsbury's, he's been a bad play caller his whole time there. And the injury to Brown is bad because if Brown was there, I think they could have done some real things. And that's the issue we have there. So, but Murray's a clear upgrade, right? From Russell Wilson. So yeah, I think that let's see, Aaron Jones isn't playing great. As long as you have depth at running back to make that deal, make it. Otherwise, you can stream the waiver wire. There's a waiver wire. I know week to week he's terrible sometimes. Matt Ryan might be almost as productive as Kyler Murray, both having bad weeks and both having good weeks. Wilson isn't cutting it, but I think that's a fair offer as long as you have the running back depth to give. If you don't have the running back depth, you can't make that deal. Delroy, I'm not at the point. I was just telling the last viewer that tomorrow's my turn forward. I still don't turn back because people got waivers on Tuesday. But if you want to hit me up, you can hit me up at Jim Coventry NFL on Twitter, or you can come back tomorrow during the stream. Again, I usually about this time, probably tomorrow about an hour later than this. But I'm happy to answer your question. I just haven't looked forward to week 7. I'm still in week 6 mode. All right, everybody, thank you for your time. Again, if you didn't hit the subscribe button, please do. I'd appreciate it greatly. And have a great day, and we will talk to you soon.